Milton F. Haley.
And your occupation in the past?
Underground miner.
How did you, what's the first thing you ever heard about Billy the Kid and the controversy surrounding it?
The controversy?
That he was...
When it came to Fort Sumner.
What'd you hear?
Most of the people, the old timers here, don't believe that he's buried here. Neither do I.
Why do they feel that way?
Because the graveyard where it was supposed to be washed away. The place where the grave is supposed to be now is a landfill. That's what the old timers say.
What happened in the bar? You told me one time before back in
the guy said that he was an older fella. He says Pat Garrett didn't kill Billy the Kid because they were friends. He helped him to escape.
Okay. And now tell me about the Heron family and the Al Hoot
Okay,
family.
Jim Heron was sheriff in no man's land. He got in trouble over cattle. He went to, let's see, is that Wilcox? Near the border. But anyway, he met Billy the Kid, or William Bonney, or what you want to call him, and they dealt in cattle. They bought cattle in old Mexico at Napo and different places, and they brought them into Wilcox and sold them and made money. Long after he was supposed to have been shot here. He's not buried here. He's buried in Hico, Texas.
What city are we in right now?
What? Fort Sumner.
So you're saying that Billy the Kid is not buried here?
We can't be. I seriously doubt if anybody, if they say Billy the Kid is buried here, why aren't they eager to prove it? If I'm trying to prove something, I'll go to every means that I can to prove it.
I would too.
What are they trying to hide? But it makes me no difference whether he's buried here or buried in Texas or buried on the moon. But the truth is the truth. Now, what are they trying to hide?
Well, I like your point about the truth is the truth. And I was hearing an article recently by Frederick Nolan saying that the truth has finally come forward because they won't dig. And I'm thinking, if you were interested in the truth, Frederick Nolan, you'd be wanting to dig. And I told these people myself, give me 2 hours and a shovel, I'll answer your problem. But tell me some more about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, several people said this Frederick Nolan's kind of a screwball from England. Is that right?
Yeah, I think he...
I don't know him. I've just heard that.
Well, he is. I think that's...
and I think it was several years ago that he was here.
I think that's a good observation. Tell me some more about the Al Hoot Trail and who told you all about that and how you were connected to the Heron family.
Okay, I was married to Emma Frost. She was the granddaughter of Jim Heron. Jim Heron had a ranch at Superior when I met him. And he had always told his family that he and Billy the Kid bought and sold cattle in Mexico. They bought it in Mexico and brought it to the States to sell. But they both had a price on their heads, so they took care of each other. The Al Hoot Trail, you have to read between the lines, because he lambasted Billy the Kid, you know, short life and all that. That was hiding for him, because to talk to Jim personally, he said Billy was not a criminal. He was a victim of circumstances. You know, if somebody's going to hang you, you're going to do everything you can to survive.
That's right. And after 69 years of hiding and denying and covering your trails, it's well done.
Can you shut it off?
Milton Haley, let's go back a moment to the about Eastland, Texas. What does Eastland, Texas mean to you or have to do with this situation?
Well, Eastland is where my cousin's relatives live, and I presume that they being that close to Hico, you know, would know something about it.
Right. What do you tell people if someone stopped you in your front yard here in Fort Sumner and asked you where the grave of Billy the Kid was? What would be your reply to them?
Get in your car and drive east, go through Clovis, look at a map, and find Eastland, Texas. When you get to Eastland, find Eagle, and then go to the graveyard.
Okay. He actually
If
died.
you want the truth.
Well, he
Now, if
actually-
you want something commercial, why, well, I wouldn't even tell anybody who's out here, because the people here themselves don't even believe it. It's a commercial deal to make money.
Okay.
People will lie for money. If they were telling the truth, why wouldn't they want it dug up to prove it?
Well, you're right. He actually died in Hyco, which is in Hamilton County, and he was buried. He really wasn't buried in Hamilton. He was buried in Hamilton County. He wasn't buried he was buried in a poor man's grave because he had no money. But have you talked to anyone else around here that holds the same views that he wasn't killed here?
Well, the guy at the bar said that. Bill Portwood doesn't think so. See, Bill Portwood's dad, Bill was born here.
Right.
Okay, Bill's father had the front axle of an old wagon. He'd had no idea where it come from other than an old axle laying in his front yard. Mr. Sweet come up there and says, this is part of the wagon that Billy the Kid's corpse was taken to Santa Fe on. I'm taking it. And Bill's dad said, touch it, and you're finished. Prepare for heaven.
Wow.
I dare say that not a whole lot of people here believe he's buried out there. If they're so sure he's buried there, prove it.
Well, you know, they have all kinds of excuses. They say there was a flood. Matter of fact,
It washed all that away.
well, you know what? I went out to the site. They have at the Bosque Redondo there. You can go in there. They actually have a little headstone there that says Billy the Kid. They try to call him McCarty now. Billy the Kid was killed right here. And I said, you know, that must have been one heck of a flood. So we scattered out looking for even one adobe brick. I mean, we went everywhere looking for an adobe brick. We couldn't find anything. And yet, in that same area where they said that flood was, there's buildings that were there in 1881 and before that are still there now. So I'm thinking, well, why did he take them? But that is interesting. I'll tell you what, I want to express to you on behalf of Brett Hall and Emily Smith and myself, Janae Valdez, how much we appreciate that you have stood by for the truth and that you have stood by Gary Graves, whom I stand by also as being a fine man
Gary
with
was
fine
a good
parents.
man. I told him, well, I give him, he came up here, never saw him before in my life, and I had some rolls of quarters. I think I gave him 5 rolls of quarters. I said, this will help you with your campaign. He said, well, you don't need to help me. I said, I want to. We need a good man for a sheriff here. But I said, let me tell you something. You're in for a world of hurt here.
Do you think that him wanting to find the truth had anything to do with his demise as sheriff?
50%.
Were they mad at him for wanting to find the truth? Were they mad at Gary for wanting to find the truth?
Gary was, what I knew of him, the Gaintners that own the motel, they think a lot of Gary. A lot of people. Bill Portwood thinks that, you know, he realizes how good a man Gary was. Gary stood for the truth. He wanted to uphold the law. There were too many people that didn't want the law upheld. They wanted to run the community the way they had always run it. And they'll continue to run it.
Well, I certainly
Gary
agree.
didn't have a Chinaman's sense when he came here. Because he said, well, he was going to uphold the law. I said, you'll never make it here.
That
They don't want somebody to uphold the law.
that historian named Frederick Nolan that Fort Sumner keeps promoting because he sides with him. Do you think?
I could tell you some stories that I wouldn't tell in front of a lady about him.
Do you think that that he has the validity to call himself a historian and at the same time refuse to look for the truth by digging?
I don't think it'd even make a good dog catcher.
I agree.
It's kind of like you said. He ought to go back to England and talk about the Queen.
Well, I certainly agree with you, sir. I'll tell you what, Mr. Milton Haley, would it be too personal to ask you where you were born originally?
Dalhart, Texas.
Dalhart, Texas, so you're Texan.
1928, December
1928.
13th. It's ancient history.
Well, you know, you and I have talked before this interview, and I would like to tell you and anyone who sees this film later that I have a high regard for your intelligence, and I have a high regard for your beliefs, and I have a high regard for your intelligence. Your ideas, your
Boy, you know the hell's the line segment.
Well, I'll tell you what, if there is one, I'll take the chances, but I'll tell you what, I'll take them with you. So I'm going to conclude this, and would you say for the camera that all you told me is, in your opinion, the truth?
I sincerely believe and have for almost 20 years that Brushy Bill, he meets every description. The thing, Jim Herron received letters. Now his daughter Rita McGrew, I knew her real well. And he received letters from somebody in Texas that had no name on it, just Jim Herron. So it matches.
Did your ex-wife feel like, what did she, from your memory of her, and things she said?
She had Don Sweet all upset. Was in there, and he was telling about Billy the Kid bearing out there. She's been dead for years now.
Right.
But
what was her name?
She's Emma.
Emma.
Her name, her maiden name was Emma McGrew.
McGrew. Okay.
And Rita McGrew was Jim Herron's daughter. And I think Rita was born in Old Mexico. And they were very familiar with the country there.
Okay.
And that's where they done Billy the Kid and them done business. But somebody said that he was born in New York or what have you, but the Herron family said he was born in Texas.
He was born in Buffalo Gap, Texas. After this interview's over, I'll talk to you about that because, as a matter of fact, you asked me how long ago it had been when they opened this issue up. In 1950, they had him right there in the governor's palace in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
You know, some of the local town people will tell you about that.
Right.
Yeah, that's hearsay, hand down.
But they had him right there, and they had the opportunity, as real historians, to treat him halfway decently and ask him some serious questions. He had a stroke and died exactly a month later.
Politicians don't treat people decent.
Well, that's true. And you know, when it came about his birth, I'd like to mention that real quickly. The historians, and I put that in quotation marks, in New Mexico try to say he's born in New York. At the same time, you can't have it both ways. They say he learned the part. He memorized the part so he could play out he's Billy the Kid. That old man playing the part. But when they asked him where he was born, if he had learned the part, he would have said New York City just to shut him up. But no, he stuck his neck right in the noose and said, I was born in Buffalo Gap, Texas, the last day of the decade, December 31st, 1859. And another big one that I have, on one side, the historians say, oh, George Coe was one of his best friends. George Coe said that Billy the Kid said his name was William H. Bonney. Now they're trying to call George Coe a liar, I guess, because they're trying to call him McCarty and trying to tie him up into New York. There's a lot of Irish people named Bonnie McCarty. But his name was William Henry Bonney. And but anyway, I won't go into that because this is your interview, but I'll tell you that later. But he stuck his neck out to tell the truth. And the problem was he told the truth. And I'll tell you what really infuriated me. I had a friend of mine named Dr. Bill Tunstall from Roswell, New Mexico, who was on the same side I am. And he was always a gentleman and always an honest and decent person. And yet I know, because I knew him personally, that he had to carry a shotgun in his car because the people of New Mexico, he was afraid they were going to kill him. They threatened him so many times. So it's been a very difficult situation to try to tell the truth in New Mexico about Billy the Kid.
Well, Emma, I took her to the museum. Each time some of her family come to visit, well, I'd take them. That's the only place you can take them up to this museum, and the other one out the lake. There's not much else here. And Dawn was telling her about Billy the Kid being buried out here, and she says, "It can't be. He and my grandfather bought and sold cattle together years after he was supposed to have been dead." And that book, Al Hoot Trail, Jim covered up for, well, they all covered up for each other.
I met a man one time who called me, Milton, and out of the clear blue sky I got this call several years ago. And the gentleman said, "I'd like to talk to you, but I'm pretty important here in New Mexico." I got in the car, and I drove to New Mexico, and he was very important.
What, the dog catcher?
No, this guy he was an honest person. And he told me about how his grandfather owned a lot of land outside of Fort Sumner, and on July the 15th came riding into town, and all the Mexicans are going, Billy the Kid was killed here last night." And he said, well, there was only one problem to that. He just left a sheep herder's camp, and Billy the Kid was there recuperating from gun wounds the night before, and he said as soon as he got well, he was going to get patched up and go to Old Mexico. So when they finally gave Pat Garrett the reward money through a legislative act, that reward says, on or about August the 1st, 1881, he did away with Billy the Kid. Well, all those people knew that the date was, just like here, today, this July 14th was a 125th anniversary, July 14th. Well, they knew the date was July 14th, but on that reward they put August the 1st, which was about 2 weeks later when he left, got well enough to go to Old Mexico. So I appreciate your information, and I'll tell you what, so your wife was pretty sure and certain that he was still, in Texas?
The whole Heron family was absolutely sure that their granddad bought and sold cattle out of Old Mexico, that Jim and Billy the Kid done business together for several years.
Well, and that kind of ties in with, covering the gentleman that called me to New Mexico told me, he said, we've known this since 1881. He said, but boy, we were told in our family, you keep your mouth shut, because my grandfather liked Billy the Kid and said he was a good kid.
I had a guy drive up there and tell me, if you tell anybody Billy the Kid's not buried here, you're in serious trouble. I said, I've been in trouble all my life. I spent 40 years working in an underground mine. You can't get in any more trouble than that. And I said, I'm going to tell the truth, or what I think's the truth, and I don't care what anybody else thinks. Doesn't make me any difference. I liked Gary Graves. He was a fine man. He was abused. And the very people that hired the attorney to get rid of him, to call the recall election?
Recall election, yes, sir.
They got stuck with the attorney bill, and they was down selling chances on this, the other, try to help pay their bill. And I doubt if they knew anything about Gary. Gary was a good man.
Yes, he was.
And I think Gaintner, have you met Gaintners?
No, sir, I haven't.
Okay, this motel used to be called Oasis. When I was building this place there, I stayed there. They call it Billy the Kid Motel. It's on this side of the road.
Right, I saw it.
Okay.
I know where it is.
Gaintners have that. They are wonderful people. They're good people, and they're good friends of Gary's. In fact, let's see. I got a letter from you and one from Emily quite a while back, but anyway, I took it up and gave it to Gaintner, and I said, give this to Gary the next time you see him. I think he's up at Cuba, isn't he?
Yes, sir, he is.
Yeah.
Well, at this point, because the tape is probably running fairly low, I would like to conclude this, but again, I want to thank you, Melton Haley, for being honest and decent enough to speak the truth, regardless of the consequences, right here in the hotbed of the activity, Fort Sumner, New
These
Mexico.
people are going to have to get up early and stay up later to scare me.
That's a good way to end it, right there.
I spent 40